gracious state of Georgia, our God-given land. The Lord has offered us domestic livestock. We have to go.
You must have hit your head real hard. Do you know you're in Georgia? Do you know it's 1973?
Well, I'm gonna need you to fill this out for me. I don't ride.
I can help you. This is knowledge. We spent decades trying to make a change for the people.
I know exactly who I am and where I came from.
Who are you then?
I'm free. How do I look?
Like you.
So yeah, you gave me this assignment, sir. I was like, what's this? A challenge. So.
All right. So what had happened was I was actually editing our conversation, and then you're talking about your background with movies and stuff, and then also like Black studies and stuff like that. And I was happening to watching the movie as well. And I was thinking like, I want to talk about this movie because on this podcast, I'm trying to hit movies and stuff a lot of people not necessarily watching not necessarily a mainstream movie, but I find it to be interesting. I was thinking like, well, this would be a good movie to talk about because I heard about it a while back because it was supposed to be showing at Sundance. And so then I didn't hear anything about it for a long time after that. And then it popped back up again and I checked it out and I was like, okay. And so I kind of knew what was up with it. I didn't know how the actual execution of it was going to be, but I knew what it was kind of going to be about. And so I kind of wish I didn't. That's why when I asked, have you seen it? Because I was thinking like, let me hit up Sabrina and see if she heard about it, one, and then if not, see if you would be willing to check it out. And that's why I also mentioned, don't watch a trailer. Because sometimes I see certain movies and I wish like, man, I wish I never saw the trailer because I just want to kind of, good, bad, or indifferent. I want to be surprised because once we get like a nugget of something, so if this is going to happen, that means this is going to happen eventually, or this is going to be a twist or this, you start just kind of looking around corners just because something's coming. So, and like I said, so that's why I was kind of like, let me check and see. And then if you haven't seen it, then, check it out, but don't see the trailer just to see if it unfolds differently for you. So when you told me you were going ahead and you started watching it, I was like, oh, okay, then that's right on.
Don't tempt me with a good time because I'm like, okay, what? How do I get it? Let me get into it right now.
You go ahead and talk why it's fresh for one. And then also it's one of those kind of movies that it's not like mainstream. If somebody was kind of wondering about it or just was kind of curious, then they could just kind of hear our discussion talking about it. So
I had only seen maybe like photos of it, like of her in an afro and stuff like that, but I didn't see the other part about the slavery part. So it is one of those films that I guess not many people have seen. I didn't necessarily focus on it when I saw a picture of her, like, oh, she's in a movie, and that was it. I just didn't go any further with that because I'm familiar with her, acting when she was younger. I haven't seen much of her stuff as an adult. Okay. So yeah, I just clicked it on and started watching, and I was like, okay. For some reason, to be honest with you, I was thinking it was going to be like Kindred, the book that's Octavia Butler and all of that. And I was like, oh, it's going to be like that. There's going to be some kind of teleporting or something going on or something like that. So that's the twist I was looking for around the corner. Like, when's it going to happen?
Did you think that because you saw her with the afro?
Exactly. That was the only reason why. Right. Yeah, that was the only reason why. Because it had to be something like that for her to all of a sudden wear an afro. And it, and she had 70s clothes on. So I was thinking it's going to happen any moment now. So I guess the way that it started was like they got really like into it. It wasn't any fluff in the beginning of it, just like some wide shot of like them just happy slaves, if you will, just like doing their jobs. And then all of a sudden something goes wrong. And then the abuse begins. It was, to me, it started from the very beginning. They got right into it from the very beginning,
Yeah, I had seen a trailer a long time ago, and so I kind of figured what was going to go on with it. And to be honest, and unfortunately, I won't watch a slave kind of movie unless it would have a twist or something to it nowadays, because I just don't want to see that narrative. I don't walk into those kind of movies. I just can't. And it's almost the same way with Antebellum. Like, to me, I wouldn't have saw that either unless I thought it was something extra being added to it versus just black folks being tormented for 2 hours straight. Like, I don't want that kind of weight on me, especially just walking into it. So if I am watching a movie that's a slavery theme or whatever, it had to have some kind of twist to it other than it's just being that, like 12 Years a Slave or something like that. I wouldn't. Okay, well, I'll give a synopsis for the movie that they gave. A slave in the antebellum South escapes her secluded plantation only to discover the shocking reality that lies beyond the tree line. This movie, I could tell that it was probably a first time writer and director. Not to be messy, but the reason why I thought that is because I think the idea and the concept of it was beyond the execution of it.
Right.
So even though it was a lot of stuff there, it's things about it that I thought was really cool, but it did take different directions than I thought it would, even though I did enjoy parts of it. Because even when it started off with, like you said, showing the slaves and everything, and you see like a secret wedding, and then the slave master is coming around, and he's kind of talking cryptic, and so something else is going on. We kind of just in the middle of it. We kind of don't know exactly what's going on, where this is going. So I'm constantly trying to tell myself, don't read into it. Just let it, deliver it to you as it happens. It's interesting how it always goes. Like, it's already bad that they're slaves, right? But then it just kind of, the screws start getting turned where it just steps up a level. Like, the tone of meet me here, I gotta tell you something, or take it up to the bedroom. Just like, okay, here we go. here we go. Here we go. It's like, it's funny how even the situation's bad, you're almost good with that, even though that's even bad. But it, like I said, slowly but surely, the usual suspects, as far as like the signs that that all this situation really entails, and the level of craziness is there. It's just like when that started kind of creeping in, it's just like, here we go. And it stayed in that time for a long time, longer than I thought they would, which I guess that could be because of financial restraints or whatever with the movie being made or whatnot. Who knows? And so when it went beyond that point, where you have the situation where they're talking about, escaping and all that, what did you think about this interpretation of slaves on a plantation and their feelings about what's going on? Like, because I was a little bit surprised that they were talking about escaping and they were kind of tired of this mess, which I thought was good to hear, because I don't think everybody just happy to necessarily be there and going to be fine with it, but at least talking about, at least some of them talking about possibly escaping or getting out of there, even though I didn't necessarily care how that was handled. But at least the talks of it, I was kind of surprised that was happening, even though I thought it was a good thing.
Well, I'll go back to what you mentioned before. I'll piggyback on your not necessarily walking into that theme of slave narrative movies. I actually was a big fan of slave narratives, like books. Okay. One of my favorite genres. It's changed because, we've become so acquainted with so many downtrodden, films about Black folks being enslaved or just bad times all the time. So I've kind of come out of that in a sense of like, are we happy? Are there any happy films? Any good outcomes? So I don't mind seeing films like that because I like history. So if it's something that's going to teach me, I'm there. For like 12 Years a Slave, I was eager to see that because I'm learning my history when I walk into a theater. And that's the way I've always kind of, thought of that. I thought that because I've seen so many, films about slavery and read some books and stuff like that, I felt like they put every cliche in that part of the film. There was the rape, there was the wedding, the only thing I didn't see was them jumping a broom. Like, where's that?
Right.
There's the, we're going to escape, but I didn't see a plan, and then when he was like, I'm going to give you a signal. Well, what was the signal? You're laughing because the signal was I'm going to get shot. I'm confused. I think she was confused too, because she was like, what, where?
Yeah. How are you going to wrestle down a man, beat him up, break his arm, he drops the gun, you leave the gun, you run towards more danger and having danger towards your back?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I didn't understand where he was running to exactly to get away.
Down the main road, not in the woods, like all the good films that I've seen where you run right to the woods, and then here comes the dogs behind you, just in the middle of the road, just running with an arm, And so I was like, I'm just so confused. So then, and then when they brought him back, I was like, how? How did that happen with the guy with the broken arm? And he got a whole man and brought him back and just threw him down in front of, the master. It was like, I got him. Like, you in what army? Like, how did that happen? Like, I'm sorry, you need to explain that,
Well, we saw what the slave did once he broke the guy's arm. So for all we know, he ran in a big old circle and ran into the guy's arms. Considering what we saw already, I didn't have high hopes for him to actually make it.
And then what arm was it? Was he was his right arm broken and the guy's left shoulder was wounded and they worked together, to come back to the plantation? I don't know. It was too much for me. And then, when she saw him and she reacted that way, and then he was like, get in the house. I'm like, get in the house. Like, I don't, what's happening with that? It's almost like you telling your child, I don't want you to see this, so get in the house. So there was parts of it where there wasn't a lot of follow through. Yes. And that was quite annoying. Especially if you're a film buff, you want it to be more developed. I felt like it was underdeveloped. I felt like writing scripts or just reading scripts, how scripts are written. So I felt like it was like a pitch that was given that was a great idea. But I think that when it came down to actually writing that script out, it was just like, okay, we've seen enough slave movies, so we know what needs to be in this. So we'll do that. And then we'll focus on the other part when they go over to the other side.
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was cool that the older slaves that were there, they were kind of concerned about, where will we go? We're leaving, so we're jumping out of the pan into what fire? So the fact that was mentioned, I thought that was fine. But like you said, with the tropes and stuff, other people do it when they do our narratives, just like we could be guilty of it too. We don't see ourselves enough and stuff, so we overcompensate when it's our turn to speak as well. We could be falling into the same pitfalls that somebody else who don't know our culture or our people would do. We could be guilty of the same thing. And also not being necessarily a seasoned in whatever your thing is could determine how you feel and what you cut out. Because even somebody who's seasoned, they probably would still leave in all those tropes, mm-hmm. Unfortunately, as if we need to be reminded of them, or that each one of those tropes need to be touched on within this 30 minutes that we have to set this whole thing up. We don't really have time for all that stuff, especially stuff that we kind of know what goes along with it. Even though it's just trying to be something different, new, with a different take on it, it still kind of did the same trappings of any other movie that was done like this from years back, mm-hmm. to me.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, yeah, here we go again kind of thing. And that's why I probably wouldn't watch a slave narrative movie, because I know what it would kind of be. And I don't want to sit through seeing that again.
Also, I'm sorry, pandering to the audience too. You know what I mean? Like, they were called domestics instead of slaves, so it's almost like a woke generation now, like, oh, we're not going to use those words. But that's not true. Let's use the words the way that they should be termed. It was slavery. Let's not use enslavement, domestics, or anything like that. They were slaves. The part where the grandfather or the father said there was a guy that came down and he came from the sky and we didn't know who he was and what, and then it just went to something else. And I was like, what? Like, what's going on? Who's the guy that came from the sky? What's it about? And then when they talked about it, why was that necessary? What was the point of that?
Okay, so we'll kind of skip ahead. So since you brought those points, which is very interesting. Okay, so the domestic part, I took that as when you find out that they were in quote unquote current times, for her, current times being the 70s. I think they were saying that because the way the slave owner was even acting and even speaking about it as if I never made you stay, like you guys could have left. Do I believe that? No. But he was almost saying it like it was an agreement kind of thing that your family wanted to do versus nobody held you here. And so I almost took that as being like a cue of like hearing them saying domestics and it's supposed to be slavery time. Like that doesn't seem right, just like the thing with, the lighter, like that lighter, that doesn't seem right. So some of those things, I didn't know if that was supposed to be that, but I don't think that the person probably was, I don't think it was a breadcrumb more so than it was probably, like you said, they just trying to be woke, but
you look tired. Like just from the description, you know what I mean, of going through here, there, and everywhere. You look like, because it's just so all over the place. Like me saying the part about, what was the part about the guy appearing from the sky wasn't necessarily to meet, what happened, jump forward, with the story as much as it was, that's what happened during the slavery time, because that was a description that, the father told the son when they talked about escaping. And he was like, well, your grandfather talked about escaping one time and he saw a guy come from the sky. And it was like, okay, so what happened? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I thought it was interesting when we, when that part ended up being paid off, right? When they kind of showed the grandfather talking to the man, which we saw that he was in the military. I guess he just dropping out of a plane and happened to land there. And he takes out his cigarette lighter, which I thought was interesting the way he did it. Showed the guy kind of a cigarette lighter. He turns on the lighter or whatnot. Then it pans away and you see that somebody, looking at them has like a hammer or something that's in their hand. And I'm thinking like, now we knew the guy was buried there because the younger slave, when he was told that story about, the man who fell from the sky and talking about his body is over that way. And he goes over there and digs it up. And he's digging through these, clothes or whatever and dirt, and he picks up this lighter, I'm like, huh? And so it had me wondering, like, who was holding that hammer? Was that the slave owner or one of those guys that took out that guy? Or was it one of the slaves that took out that guy and buried him back there? So I was like, huh, like that was interesting, even to leave that open for interpretation. What did you think when you saw that part? When you saw that scene?
So when that part, like you said, we're jumping back and forward on that, because when that part unfolded, it was towards not the end, but the other part of it. When you mentioned that they spoke, it was more like they were in each other's presence, right? And he was like, we didn't hear the conversation. We didn't hear the dialogue that was going on between the father and the the guy that fell from the sky. I'm only describing it the way that they said it was. And but he was quite comfortable in talking to the slave. You know what I mean? So that's a different spin on it too. Like, who was this guy? You know what I mean? Did he know about this situation over here and he just happened to land there and he's like, hey, here's a cigarette lighter. He didn't look shocked or anything like, why would you not recognize that was a slave scenario? You know what I mean? There was a shack and there was this guy in tattered, clothing, but he looked really comfortable when he, gave him the cigarette lighter. Yeah. So that's a whole nother, kind of thought of like, I wonder if he knew that this situation existed and maybe he landed there just to kind of check it out or something and met his undoing with this person with this axe. As you said, we don't know who that was. And I don't know if that angle had to be there. You know what I'm saying? Like, what purpose did it serve for us to just see a hand and an axe it would have been better if he just was like, hey, you know what I mean? And came kind of running towards him with an axe, and we were like, oh, well, you know, he obviously killed him, you know, and that's why he's, you know, buried there. So,
because they could have thought he was an alien, a demon. They don't, you know, who knows what somebody's interpretation would be of something coming out of the sky when all you heard about was Jesus or whatever, you know, and you've never seen anything like that. What does that mean, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's why I went back and forth on the time traveling thing, because I was like, oh, there it is. A time traveler showed up in the field, and the grandfather, you know what I mean? I just kind of ran with that until we actually saw what unfolded towards the end, you know?
Yeah. So it was just kind of interesting, the setups and stuff. And I can't tell if the setups, how much thought was put into them. And I can't tell, like I said, sometimes you do things a certain kind of way because you're a novelist. And sometimes you do the same kind of things because you're an expert. But the difference is your intentions and putting it there and why, right? And so it's hard to tell for me if this stuff in this movie was happening because of, I couldn't tell the reason why, the intention. Because that also makes it and affects how I interpret the movie, you know, because they could be laying stuff that they don't know that they're laying down. And I'm going, you know, down a rabbit hole with it off of something that they didn't think twice about.
Right.
You know, because
everything you write in that script is supposed to lead towards something. It's not supposed to be there just to be there. Right. You know, as we know, there's a difference in plays and scripts. In plays, you know, you're basically talking a lot. It's a lot of dialogue because you only have that one set. So you have to talk about a lot of things that's going on off, you know, set. But with film, it's show, not tell. You know, so a lot of those things that was going on in there didn't necessarily have to happen. There was a lot of dialogue, you know, about things that we didn't see. Whereas, you know, maybe if that scene was shown, like, oh, your grandfather walked outside and he saw this man, and the man dropped from the sky, and then just played out that whole thing. A man drops from the sky, you know, gives him the cigarette lighter, someone comes up, and then we know in that instance, oh, he was killed. And we still don't know why, you know, but maybe you give us like a reason why. He said something to us, give us a little bit of dialogue, you know. Oh, he said, you know, I'm from Cleveland, you know what I mean? And that's like a hint, you know what I mean? And that leads us to something else instead of it just being just something kind of added to it to bring in the outside world. You know, that's probably what the premise was, to bring something from the outside world to that time. But we don't know how long they were, you know, in slavery. I think she said she was born into it, but we still don't know a timeline. You know, we don't know when it started. We don't know, we know her family, but we just don't know enough about how this happens. And, you know, we have to, you know, still sticking with this part of the movie, we have to talk about, you know, The Village. I'm sure you saw that movie.
Yeah, I did.
So, you know, we know that there has to be a play on that movie, on The Village, and, you know, how the village unfolded. And, you know, that scene of her coming out from the woods and landing on the highway, you know, you could put those side to side and see it's a play on that, you know. So I'm wondering if that thought came about when this person wrote it, like, oh, this would be great, but let's make this slavery instead of the premise of the film The Village. As we know, that was really developed, and a very, very much a twist when it happened, a shocker. How did you feel when she came out of the woods?
The impact was not really there for me, only because I had seen the trailer, which I hated that I seen the trailer. So to me, trailers, they have to be crafted a certain kind of way. But I also know when you don't have a lot going on and you don't have the benefit of a particular star or a particular company who's promoting and pushing it, you're kind of putting your trust in them, and more so than you are what you're getting from the trailer. And so when it's more independent, a lot of times, you know, or maybe it's like a blockbuster movie, there's these key points that they give where you pretty much, when you see the trailer, when you're watching the movie, you're just waiting for that key point to come up, you know? And so with this one, I knew it was going to come eventually. They bring back her husband, you know, quote unquote dead. She gets upset. She attacks. and then ends up running, trying to get away. And like you said, she goes to the street and she sees a highway or something like that, and you see a car go by, and it's just like, whoa. Now, I thought that was powerful the way they did it, because she's like, what is that? What's going on? Like I said, I knew it because of the trailer. I was just wondering where it was going to go from here. Because for some reason, you know what? I just didn't know how it was going to go, because it was almost kind of like, I kind of think I know what's going to happen for the most part, quote unquote, because of the trailer. But I didn't know the nuances of it, because it could have went a lot of different ways. And even if they would have just played it straight, I would have been fine with it. But it just kind of, as it went along, it just started kind of, like I said, the concept was good. The idea of it was good. But the pieces just didn't support the foundation to me. So the whole thing of her going out there and seeing that, I'm thinking like, wow. And then, she almost get hit by a large truck. The large truck is driven by Common. Common gets out the car, and, she faints in front of the truck. He picks her up and put her in the truck, and he's trying to take her, to a hospital that's nearby. And she wakes up and she's in a vehicle which she has no idea or concept about. And so even with that, I was the whole time trying to figure out, is she scared enough? Is she confused enough? Is her interpretation of waking up in that kind of surrounding, seeing a man dressed like that, pretty much floating in the air and quickly, like how much do I believe her interpretation of her being in that situation? It was just a whole bunch of, even a lack of questions that he had for her. Even with him doing a good thing and like, okay, if we almost hit somebody, the right thing would be to take him for help or wait there for help or something like that. He took it into his own hands, which makes sense because, if somebody sees us in the middle of nowhere, that's where we're probably going to end up dying because nobody's going to come for us. So we're going to have to start walking and find our own help. So even with that, it was just kind of like, is she tripping off of the situation enough? Is he asking enough questions?
I think that's great as far as that, you picked up on that, because I was checking for that, because like I said, I haven't seen her much as an adult. And I thought that she, facial expressions wise, the way that, body language wise, she was good. But I think the dialogue was not up to speed. I think if you were a slave, you wouldn't be as quick with your dialogue talking to a stranger. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that, I would say the dialogue would be slower because, you would you weren't allowed to really speak much, you know what I mean, as a slave. Right. So you wouldn't be as quick-witted necessarily, as much as like, I didn't hear her reflect back on like, on the plantation or the massa, or I'm gonna get in trouble, or I've escaped, or it was more like you said, who are you? What is this thing? Where are we going? What's up? You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. And like you said, his reaction was like, oh, I just picked up this person that's dirty in this era dress, you know what I mean, of slavery on the highway, and I guess I'll take it to the hospital. There wasn't enough questions about how she landed there.
And I think it was on purpose, so it wouldn't have to be addressed until they wanted to address it. And to me, that's not fair. You do the work and you figure out what that would be, or you just don't show that segment. She could have passed out and woke up in a hospital bed. They could have skipped that whole uncomfortable thing in the truck.
That's good. Yeah.
Because you giving me a place to get information and you're not giving it to me. Then why am I here? So that was just space that, if you're not going to do anything with it, don't have me in there, because it stands out that it's not happening, because they would have to speak. Yeah. And they spoke. Right. But then also in there, it'd be a lot of exposition going on, and there wasn't, for as long as you've seen them inside that vehicle.
Right. And that goes along with, how does it move the story along? Right. So when you look at it, like you said, did that whole scene do anything for the story? No, it just showed that she was fearful because she was in a machine, or whatever she thought that was. And
it made him seem like he was crazy because he wasn't asking no questions. Like, you don't just pick up nobody off no street and not say nothing. First thing they'd be saying, like, who your family? We do that to this day. If it's somebody that's like, who your family, so we know who to take you to, or who you need to go see, something.
He didn't even ask if she had a cell phone. Well,
exactly.
I mean, they didn't back then.
Cell phone. Yeah, not a cell phone, but you know.
Making a joke out of that. But like, you're right. Like, where do you want me to take you? You want me to, you know, make a phone call? And, you know, the fact that he was like, there's a hospital right up here. Let me take you there. Yeah. Okay. And then I was like, why would you just, I mean, I guess you would take her to the hospital because she almost got hit. But like you said, let me drop you off there. Like, you'll be cool once I get you there. But what's going to happen after that?
Yeah. And we knew better than that anyway. So like they didn't know who she was and all that. And he had to leave her there. And he kind of heard and saw the vehicle for this mental hospital or whatever that they were going to be taking her to. He felt guilty, went back to get her. Which I don't think we would just leave somebody there like that and without them. No.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we kind of don't roll like that. So he just took a long way around to doing what we thought he should have been doing in the first place.
Right.
And it makes us almost question him in the first place for even leaving then. If anything, it wasn't suspenseful because that's what he should have been doing. It just made us look at him sideways for even leaving in the first place, for thinking that was all right.
Right.
So they're doing stuff to kind of build things. And to me, all the stuff they're using to build is kind of taken away from how I feel about the character for one, and then also the situation.
And if you think about the times that it was, that era was supposed to be like the 70s when it was all Black Power and all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, oh, there's a hospital, I'm gonna drop you off, you're gonna be good, you know. And then like you said, when he left and was like, you know, obviously he was kind of a little bit torn. And then when he came back and was like, oh, I know, just trust me, I know. Let us know. How about you give us a clue? You know, oh, I know, I've had that experience. And she had to keep asking him in the hospital, what does that mean? You just picked a stranger up on the road. And that's where the dialogue comes in too. Right. Because they were like on the same level of communication and they should not have been there.
Right.
She should have been, and I don't want to be stereotypical of like, what we gonna do here? What, you know what I mean? But like, the dialogue were like, they were homies. And it was like, you should have always known that she was not going to make a connection because there was something going on. And it was just not there. It was just like, I know. Well, how do you know? I just know. I know. Well, what do you know? You know what I mean? It was just not there.
Yeah, her transformation sequence, the same thing came up with that too. Like, who are you? I'm me. I'm me.
Right.
I'm me. You know, that's kind of that's how it's as if they went through all that stuff together.
Right.
And they asked, hey, so what do you know about this gentleman here?
Right.
Oh, his name is Franklin. Okay. Hey, dude, what do you know about her? Oh, her name's Alice.
Right.
Anything else you guys know about each other? No.
She likes long dresses and jumping in front of trucks. I don't know.
You spent how long together? And you guys don't, nobody's asking anything, and you answering questions with questions, and she's talking a lot considering where she's from and what's happening, but is not saying anything. Because you can still say your situation. Just like if you were if you ran to another slave out in the field, wouldn't you be like, I came from slave master, blah, blah, blah. And our plantation is this way, blah, blah. At least say that.
Right.
At least that's a thing.
Right.
And start, like she was almost, on some parts, it's almost like she was embarrassed by it and was like, well, that ain't me no more, so I'm not going to even talk about it. Like, huh? What do you mean? That was your life yesterday.
Exactly.
You're not to the point of putting it behind me yet. That's still you. And if this worked like a regular movie, your butt would have been back up in there before this movie was over anyway.
Exactly.
Because the first thing that dude would have did was made a phone call talking about, hey, one escaped. They're heading towards the highway.
Exactly.
Be on the lookout.
Right. The police would have picked her up and took her back because that's the whole, like, they know about this thing over here. So, yeah, that was, I don't know. That was bothersome that. And then when they went to, he was like, oh, my brother owns this this business here.
They harvest blackberries.
Okay. And then the brother was disappointed in him. Why? Like, why? Like, what's the dynamics there? What's going on between you and the brother?
Yes.
What's happening there? It wasn't developed. It just wasn't developed.
Like, yeah, because they had an argument about the nod. Hey, man, are you okay? He was like, And the brother's like, a nod is not an answer.
Right.
Like, he gets up and puffs up in his face. You know what a nod means? You know a nod is what a...
But a nod is a nod, right? A nod doesn't even have dialogue. Like, they shouldn't even chose that dynamic, because we know what a nod is. We know what a nod is when we're out in America and we just do the like, what's up? Glad you're here nod. You know what I mean? We're not speaking, we're just nodding and that's it, I
think they were trying to show his brother was concerned about what was on his mind, because we knew that he was conflicted about not going with Alice on this suicide mission. But his brother never showed concern for him at all, to the point where he's almost sounded like he's going to get rid of him if he kept messing up. Mm-hmm. So if you're an incompetent brother that gets on your nerves, unless you need anything from him, you just let him be in the corner, milling it over. Mm-hmm. Because he ain't going to say anything you want to hear or will make sense to you, and probably going to piss you off if you heard what he had to say. Right. So they did that for us so we can see his conflict with not going through with the situation that he was asked to do. But this kind of goes back to after the hospital thing, and his heart makes him not want to leave her there, and for whatever reason, be it somebody got put into a mental hospital before that he saw that happen to, or if it happened to him, but he knows that that's where you go to get your head drilled in, your brain drilled in. He knew that much, I guess. But if you knew that, then they're gonna be at those hospitals when somebody who don't know who they are would be considered crazy, and more than likely they'll put you in a mental hospital, if not let you bleed out, if that was your situation in the hospital. I was surprised that he saw the white nurse and didn't look sideways about it. Like, you know what? We're going to find you another hospital. I almost thought, like, the way that it was almost kind of set up, I thought it was going to be one of those kind of things. Or even her seeing the white nurse and being concerned, and he explained to her, like, hey, it's okay. It's okay. We got everybody here. We got black nurses here. We got white.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah, that is true. It seems like she would have been like, oh, this person is obviously an oppressor, and I just have to, maybe even back up, like, oh, I don't want to cause any trouble here, never, or maybe even run out, like, oh no, I don't want to be here. Yeah. The other thing, when you were mentioning the mental health aspect of it, I think that it's a disservice to not develop that plot and talk about mental health, as far as in our community, you know what I'm saying? So that was an opportunity for him to at least tell us, I had a loved one and she had an, issue, and I brought her to a hospital and we thought she would be okay, and this thing happened to her. Right. Instead of just, being like, something happened, that's it. I'm not going to tell you what it is. And then we just see pictures. The pictures are supposed to describe or give us some kind of, a plot we're supposed to make up on ourselves, or a narrative we have to make up ourselves of, like, oh, there's a woman in the picture. Oh, they were together in this picture. Oh, she's not here. She's not in the house.
When she was going through his stuff?
Well, I think there were still, I think there was
some... Talking about when she was going through his stuff, or before that?
Well, I thought there were some pictures, like, sitting on something.
Okay.
Like a frame picture or two of him and a woman, Okay. So when I saw that, I thought, well, obviously he had a relationship with someone and she's no longer there. So I don't know. I feel like any opportunity, even though it was staged in that era of the 70s, I think that was a missed opportunity to talk about mental health,
Yeah. And so I thought it was an interesting one. Okay, so it's at a hospital, but that's fine. But I didn't know what the likelihood of, an Ebony magazine being there, and then also a Jet magazine being there. We had Diana Ross on the cover. Yeah, in the hospital, which is fine. Yeah, but, right. If it's a mixed crowd there, I don't know if that would have been there. But what's even more interesting is when he got her and went home, he had the same two magazines, on his table as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, so okay, I hear you. We're in the 70s. Diana Ross is beautiful. You got Pam Grier here and all this kind of stuff. And, hey, do you remember this? And he brings out the album cover. I know you know this song. You know, this jogging memory, here's a phone. Remember this? I know you talk to your girls on the phone all the time. I know y'all love this.
Dude, you picked her up on the highway. Let's talk about cars. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
That's more relevant than what you're saying right now. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
That just didn't make sense.
And even when he turns on the TV, the Sanford and Son, and then it's, you know, Pam Grier having an interview about her Foxy Brown character, I think it was, you know, and it's just like, you know, if they would have leaned into the danger of media and how they see us, good, bad, or indifferent, how that plays a part of us, and how that's not the truth. That's not how you learn who you are. Those are not vetted and necessarily viable interpretations of Black culture. But they use that as her learning method to inspire herself as she rebuilds herself. Like, if I got a new Black body, would I feed that Black body that?
Mm-hmm.
And would that be okay? But just seeing it like that, I think it could have been a bigger lesson or say something about that, you know.
How much more powerful would it have been if they would have showed a clip from Roots?
Yeah.
That was in the 70s. That was around the time when Roots was out. You know, how much more powerful would it have been if that was the first thing that she saw on TV, like a trailer for Roots or something like that, you know?
But before playing like Stevie Wonder, even though I love Stevie Wonder, but even if they had did something, you know, by what's his name, Gil Scott-Heron or something that was saying something, because it seemed like he was part of the Black Panther Party in some kind of way. He was tied into that kind of thing, the Black Power movement, that kind of thing. So, like I said, the examples of stuff that was shown was very superficial. I'm not saying that stuff went beyond, but it's almost like every channel he changed to had something else that I was like, ain't that much Black on TV today. So for him to be back then flipping those channels and everything, we went from Sanford and Son to Pam Grier interview to some other Black thing, and I'm like, I can't do that today. You know. And I understood the legwork they were trying to do, but it's something about presentation is important too. There's certain points and things you want to make, and like I said, I thought, and then her reading all those books and just learning sense of self and all, like, okay, so it's been a day or two, and she went through all those books. It's like, you know, they always talk about like it's only so many books you can read in a lifetime because you know how many pages and how much time it takes to read and all that kind of stuff. And they had her just going through all these books and picking out these perfect pages that have the perfect thing that says what a slave is and what enslavement is and you know, emancipation and all this other kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. And he leaves her in his place, like. Say he's not paranoid, but how about just being a concerned person who you could tell is kind of out of it, but you just leave them in your house? People don't leave their own family members in their house and they know them. So
right.
And just kind of left her to the knowledge and the books and the TV and his closet with the clippings that lays out his whole situation, allegedly, you know, for her to interpret and all this other kind of stuff, and for her to be inspired to want to have an afro and find the perfect leather revenge outfit to go pay back the aggressor, you know.
How did the bologna sandwich move the story along?
I thought it was too much mustard. I thought it was too much mustard, personally.
I was offended because it wasn't fried. So that was like, you gave her that bologna and you didn't even fry it yet? You didn't even teach her that lesson? The goodness of the fried bologna with the burnt ring around the outside? Like, you already cheated her.
With Common and his character, I wasn't surprised. I was surprised he fed her. I was surprised he had food in the fridge. And the fact that it was so crazy, making her a bologna sandwich with all that mustard, let me know that, you know, yeah, he's a single dude and probably that's how he living. And that's the first time he probably had to do anything for anybody to entertain or give them food. So that's probably what he had in his fridge. And it's probably, he probably thought that was a real meal.
He did have cheese.
And so to me, I was tripping off the fact that he was proud of a bologna sandwich with too much mustard on it.
But then it also kind of plays on, like, there's scenes in movies with aliens where, like, you know, the alien is trying something out for the first time and they're like try it. It's, you know, it's this and it's delicious. And they eat all of it. You know what I mean? They want more and more and more. And it was just like, I don't understand how the bologna sandwich is going to move this along. I mean, I know people got to eat, right?
Yeah.
Like if you said you're hungry, you know, but I just didn't see how that was going to move things along, you know.
The only thing that could have been worse than that if he would have pulled out some black eyed peas and some greens and stuff and like, hey, you know, my mom had cooked this the other night. We had it left over. It's kind of like, I wouldn't want for her to have every possible black experience, quote unquote, black experience in that one apartment within 2 days. You know what I mean? So for her to get all this self-knowledge and black power and music and all this other kind of stuff and, you know, and soul food and movies and all this in one situation, I think it'd have been overkill.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. But he was very proud of it.
Like I said, I don't think it moved it. Yeah, he definitely was. He was like, you can have more if you want. Like I'm good.
So what did you think of her journey of discovery that kind of happened inside that apartment while he was gone?
I thought it was, you know, it was like you said, it was in 48 hours or 24 hours, and then, you know, ultimately 48 hours. You know, the fact that the phone scared her at first, and then, you know, he told her about how the phone book works. Yeah. And she was kind of scanning through those. That I didn't quite understand. I'm okay with like not knowing everything that's going to happen next, but that thought process of like, who is she calling didn't make sense. Like if you don't understand how the phone works, you know what I mean? Like there's a whole science behind Alexander Graham Bell. You know what I mean? Like that wasn't fully developed as much as it's like, oh, this is a thing you and your girlfriends talk on and the noise bothers you, but then all of a sudden you're calling somebody. Who could you be calling? You didn't give us a hint. You know, like that's the part with the show not tell thing where we needed to know, like she needed to say something out loud. Like, you know, I wonder if Rachel, it just didn't, I can't even make up a scenario for it because it's almost like she figured out that there was two different worlds, right? And she was going to contact Rachel, but we didn't know that she figured that out. So that part just didn't make sense.
Yeah, because she figured it out through reading some books and some TV, some newspaper clippings. It was kind of not earned. Like you said, she just knew all this stuff. And she was emboldened. Because wouldn't you think that slave master is that way? Why would I want to contact anybody that's associated with him? Especially if you don't even understand the concept of a police officer or whatnot and how that actually works and in your power structure. And just because you see people with power, you know, as a slave, you know that somebody else's power don't necessarily mean your power. Right, you know, it takes people a long time to find that for themselves and to sit in that and to be emboldened enough to flex it. So I thought it was kind of interesting that she even thought that, to the point that she would go to the wife, and what are you going to do with that? And what, besides her possibly kidnapping you and taking you back? What was the other part of that that you were going to do?
Did they show the wife over there on the plantation?
No, they showed the guy's mother, but they never showed the wife. I asked him the wife was dead or something until the son got brought from somewhere with a suitcase, something like, so where did he come from? Because like I was even thinking like back then, only way your wife probably wouldn't be there is for her to be dead. So it wouldn't be like, oh, I married the other slave owner on the other plantation and we're going to, you know, have visitation days. So I thought that was weird too. But I don't mind that because we were in current-ish times and we didn't know it. So to me, that was kind of cool because it's kind of like, where'd that kid come from? And why would the mom not be there if she's not dead? You know, so I just thought, you know, he was a, you know, widower and he had his son and he had his mom. And so I didn't mind that part because I just took it as something that was going on and I wasn't for sure why.
Yeah, when I saw the boy with the suitcase and the father was talking to him, the first thing that stood out to me was his attire, because the father had the dreary, dark clothes on and this kid like had a white outfit on. And I was like, where's he come from? Yeah. You know what I mean? And he was very young. So for him to not be kind of dirty or have dark clothes on because of that era, it was just kind of strange for me. And he was indifferent to his father. His father tried to engage him and he was just like, whatever, how's school? That stood out to me too. Like, what do that's a very modern term. Like,
right.
In all the slave movies or stuff that I've read, I've never really seen or heard anything where the father was engaged in like, how are you doing in school as much? You know what I mean? So that was interesting. That part was interesting.
Yeah, and they could have had school then, just like they had church. But I did think it was interesting, like I said, the boy would be coming out of nowhere like that. And the funny thing you said about the clothing, and I saw them going to church, right? And, like you said, the slave owner was wearing kind of like his dreary color palette. Mm-hmm. And then also the other white ranch guy that's dressing like that. And then you saw the black women with these bright reds and different things in their outfits, right? And they're walking. And I was just thinking about how like black folks like bright colors and things like that. And this is the first time seeing that scene of them walking. It was a shot of them walking. We were looking at their back and they were walking towards something and they were going towards the church. This is the first time I saw that kind of thing in a movie. And I thought, they got them black folks in those bright colors just in case they had to run and you could see them probably in the woods with these bright colors. Not so they could feel beautiful and all this other kind of stuff. It's so they could see your butt when they're trying to chase you down or shoot you when you're trying to get away. And I've never thought that before until I saw it in this movie. I'm like, huh. But did the director put that in there intentionally? Probably not. But it was interesting to me that the costume when I saw that, like, huh. Do we like bright colors because of a different reason than, because sometimes, we just be used to certain things and we just don't know how the origins of those things. It's just tradition or it's just taste that's been modified. Your taste is whatever you're conditioned to like or appreciate. It's not always the truth of it. It's a lot of bad things that we like and that we gravitate to. But that's the first time I've ever seen
like the head wrap, that the head wraps were worn because women weren't allowed to show their hair. Their natural hair. So they had to cover their heads and, whatever we do, we try to make it beautiful. You know what I mean? So it turned into something completely different.
Yeah.
But when we were talking about, her visiting the wife, I didn't get that. I didn't understand why we were just meeting the wife at that time. I didn't understand how the wife left there. I didn't understand if the wife was like, at first when I saw the wife, I was like, oh, she's not one of the good guys, but like, oh, she was like different to that whole situation. So I'm out, I can't do this. But then she's like, we were good to you, like, gal, you should be glad. She probably brought the most genuine, authentic dialogue from that era to the modern times, as opposed to when she was talking to Common. You know what I mean? Like when she was talking to that woman, you felt like they had a relationship. Like, oh, they go back. You know what I mean? And the vernacular that she was using was appropriate for what role she was in that era or that scene that, that we didn't see her in. We never even saw her on that plantation, but she brought that to the modern times, so I was confused as to like, I thought she was going to say, because she met her. She was like, oh, okay, I'll meet you. So I thought it was going to be like, well, I want to apologize. That was wrong. And I realized it. And that's why I left. And,
I thought she was going to meet her with her husband or ex-husband in the car with her to go take her butt back. Because the thing about it is, if she was that bit out about it, I think she would have called the cops and said something about that mess a long time ago.
Right.
I don't think she had like a guilty heart and went on with her life and talking about those poor black folks on that plantation. No, she went on about her business. So I figured she was fine with it. She just didn't care about that dude no more. She was tired of him or missed shopping or whatever she missed or whatever, her girlfriends or whatever. But I didn't think it was because of no guilty heart. Because like if that was the case, I think that thing would have shut down a long time ago.
That's true. But then what's the premise of her being in modern times? Is it, tell me something. Like you said, I don't want to be there anymore. I liked being here, but I didn't say anything because that's making my money. You know what I'm saying? Like, what was the purpose of the plantation? Was he, growing blackberries or whatever the situation was? Did we know that he was a producer of some, vast situation that was needed? And that's why he kept that up. Because one point I thought it was kind of like a Juneteenth kind of scenario. When I first started watching it too, I was like, maybe it's like, because I didn't get into like the fact that it was in like Maryland or something. You know what I mean? I was like, I think just looking at it like, okay, well, maybe it's like a Juneteenth scenario where the slaves were freed, but they didn't tell, these folks over here, they've been enslaved, right, in all this time. And now they're going to find out. I just had a lot of scenarios like that.
I'm sure they were producing something. And I'm sure like those folks even back then who didn't want to give it up, even when the law had changed, they didn't want to give it up. So somebody not wanting to give up power, I think that's the reason. They don't want to give up the power more so than it being wrong or right or what the law says. I think that, if it's working for them, then, most people are not going to change anyway. Good, bad, or indifferent. It's kind of like if it's working for them, they'll keep it going.
And that goes back to how long was that plantation going? Is it generational? It has to be, because remember, her husband's father's father and all of that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So that would have been interesting if that was developed a little bit more. Yeah. But I think also, if we think about like the blaxploitation era, some of us are fine with it and great with it. It brought us, as Black folks, it empowered us. And we hold that era dearly to ourselves. And some folks look at it as, it being blaxploitation, and like, the films weren't good films. They were just, representation of us, and it wasn't how all of us actually were. Well, without telling my age, 102, I remember going to those movies. My mom took us to those movies, and we were very young. But that's what we had back then. We had those movies, and it was about seeing Black folks on the screen. And I remember going to like, drive-in movies and seeing them. And I think I had a conversation with my brother at one point. Like, I just realized there was a lot of stuff going on in those films that we probably shouldn't have seen. But for Black folks at that time, it was about representation. It was about the fact that you could take your kids to those movies and they could see Black people empowering, themselves and going against the grain of what was going on in the 70s. I saw Lady Sings the Blues, and I, from that time on, have a great fondness for Billie Holiday, one of my favorite singers. I knew that's why I wanted to become a singer, was because of Billie Holiday, because you're, a jazz singer. So I have a connection to that era, but as an adult, I can look at it in two different ways of like, oh, that probably wasn't that good, that, Pam Grier was probably exploited in the sense of the way that her body was shaped. There were probably some scenes that probably could have done without, just exploiting her as a woman, as a female, as a Black woman. But she owned herself. She knew what she was doing, and she owned it in the way that she presented herself, and she acted. She was a superhero to anybody to watch those films.
I think Black folks are good at bypassing the parts that we feel don't apply to us. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just like, especially like those types of movies and stuff, to me, it's almost kind of like, and you're hungry and you starve, you're going to eat it, even if it's not stuff in there that you want. And then the parts you really dig into are the parts you like, that you feel is going to nourish you. And then the parts you don't like, you either spit them out or you just ignore them on the plate. That's how you could watch something that's probably got a whole bunch of crazy stuff in it and still just see positivity out of it. Mm-hmm. Or see heroicism, even though some other stuff might be happening. So you kind of just take what applies to us, and we're just really good at, like I said, picking out the parts that we want. The stuff that don't apply, we just leave it on the plate. And that's with anything, with food, with movies and music and whatever. And that's how, even though it could be something that could be negative or have a whole bunch of different kind of landmines in it, we could still find something in there for us. Somebody else would just see it as just junk, or they might just see it as just evil or exploitative or whatever. And we'd be like, no. You might see him as a bad guy, but for us, he's our hero. Mm-hmm. And that's why you can't let people dictate what people or things are to us, because the way they see it and their interpretation will never match ours. I think it's just something that, we had to deal with, and we figured out a way to find what we need, even when it's in scarcity. Other folks, they don't have to necessarily deal with it like that. So they could just say, hey, I don't want this one. Yeah, because you have 30 other ones. If we only have two,
Right.
We'll take the good one and the bad one and find out what's good in the bad one too.
Exactly. That's true. That's true. And I could see the pitch or the scenario for this. If you look at it like Black enslaved woman, you know, like you said, wants to escape, but meets the 1970s era kind of thing. I could see it floating around in your head, you know, saying this is, and it's a little bit of a play on The Village, you know, that she's in this community and comes out on the other side. I could see a little bit of a play on it of time traveling in some way. You know what I mean? I think that probably would have been a good development in it somehow. You know what I mean? Maybe if we took the parachuter and called him a time traveler, and that set up some kind of premise of like it being a time traveling situation, but it's not. You know what I mean? So I think that what they were trying to do is really just empower her from being a slave to being like Cleopatra Jones. You know what I mean? Because even in the way that she was speaking to the mistress or I don't know what you call her, the master's wife, she was speaking to her like she was empowered. Like, you're not going to do anything to me. And, you know, the fact that she slapped her and all of that stuff too. But it was just, you know.
But that's why I thought the way she got to that point was too quick. That's why when that happened, I was kind of surprised. But I'll tell you, my favorite part of that diner scene was the boy saying like, "Hey, Alice, I'm hungry."
Yeah.
Nobody serves you. I'm like, she didn't flinch on it. It was like, it was a day ago, you know what I mean? Or 2 days ago. And she's just all of a sudden just like, I know who I am because I read all day and watched some TV. And it was just like, and then, like I said, to be bold enough to even go into the face of danger like that, right? Which is crazy. Like I said, it could have went bad. She could have been there to grab her to take her back. And if that would have happened in the movie, I wouldn't have been surprised. But it didn't happen, so that was fine. They end up going to go see the Pam Grier movie and everything, right? And she sees that movie and she gets the bright idea of, I'm going to go back to that slave owner. I'm going to take his ass out. Right. That's interesting, right? Okay. Right. You know, from a movie, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how real life works. Okay. And so they going back and strategizing what they going to do. And this is how we got a map and blah, blah, blah. And Common walks out and be like, hey, we're going to need these. A handgun, one. A shotgun. One, we're going to need these. Now, you're going on to a plantation.
Right.
You know nothing about in the middle of the forest. You in what army? A slave 2 days freed.
Right.
This Black empowerment guy who's, you know, gave up on the movement because the movement gave up on him. And they going to go with a handgun and shotgun into the woods, into this plantation where these people could be heavily armed or whatever. And you don't even know if the people you go in there to try to save is going to turn on you. You don't know none of that stuff.
So that's the point. She never said, I don't remember hearing a whole like dialogue about where she was from. She said, my family. I didn't remember her saying anything about, you know, they're being enslaved. You know, we need to go rescue them from a plantation. It was just like, they're somewhere and we need to go get them because I'm going with or without you. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but we know that's what the situation but be it her calling it or not, because she was saying that she's going to burn it down. I wouldn't go into a person's house with one handgun and a shotgun and I don't know where I'm going. So I thought that was just kind of interesting. So, you know, when Common was acting like he didn't want to go, he was just like, you know what, I ain't gonna do this. But to not even offer his own, you know, maybe his brothers in the Black Panther, hey, we're gonna get to call the guys up. We're gonna come back and handle this, you know, me and our army, we're gonna bring these folks, you know, or call the police you do trust or whatever, you know. But it was just like this thing, like, we're just gonna go in there, us two, we're gonna go in there and, you know, you barely got her off the street. You can't even take her to the hospital, right? Oh, even that didn't go well. Drop her off. Oh, I can't leave her here. Let me pick her back up. You know, and so you go into a situation
that's where the development comes in, because it needed to be a connection. He needed to feel a connection. I think that's why when I was talking about the part about, I wish there was like a break with her where she was just like, I figured all of this stuff out. You know, I was a slave, you know what I mean? And I left my people there and I got to go back and get them, and just some kind of connection where maybe he tells us what happened with the woman that he lost or something. You know what I mean? There was no real connection made to make him want to go, except for the fact that she was going with or without him. That's the way that I felt about it. That he was like, okay,
yeah,
I'll ride.
They had, like I said, they couldn't have none of that stuff because they didn't have any time. There's no way.
Yeah.
She don't know if she could trust him. He sure don't know that he could trust her. You don't know the trust. How do you know that she ain't going out there recruiting him? What if the twist was she was out there to trick him to get him on a plantation, and that's how the slave owner would get recruits. They needed more black men because her black man died, right? So we need another stud, right? Go out there looking hurt, get in front of a truck, lock in with him, bring him on back.
Right. That would have been a good plot. That right there is part 2. So that would have been a good plot.
You know what I'm saying though? Like something, but to think so it's crazy that she even thought that plan, and it's crazy, especially because she got inspired by that movie. And as a grown man, he should have been there and saying why this wouldn't work, and this is a better way for us to do it. Let's get the authorities, let's get or whatever, or if we're gonna keep it off the books, I got some boys, let's work this out. But to be like, I'm gonna go and ride with that, and then he stands her up, and that's when he gets into it with his brother, like, you all right, man? What does it not mean? You know that. That's when all that stuff came up. So we're just kind of but then they decide they're gonna ride, and they go to the outskirts of the plantation and set it on fire.
So does a film need to have a connection between a male and a female? I mean, obviously that was vacant for a reason.
Yes. And I was surprised because I was kind of wondering, not that I would have wanted it, but the trope is so common that the fact that it didn't happen, I was wondering what's up with that. Now the reason why it wasn't, I found out later on, wasn't what I thought, but the lack of a relationship, I thought was kind of weird. And it would have been weird anyway, because it shouldn't have. Not that quickly, not that way. It's almost like you're taking advantage of somebody who's younger than you or something, or that's not quite right. That's not fair. Right. Yeah. That's not right. And it should not happen. But the lack of it, even though it should not have been for those reasons, if it wasn't for some other thing that was going to come up later, it would have happened. And it still would have been wrong.
Yeah.
But it was omitted for different reasons, even though it should have been omitted because it had been wrong.
Right. But that's where the part comes in when you were saying he could have got reinforcement like the Black Panthers or the police to help out. But the part that's missing is, what's my investment in this? Why am I going to help you out with this? And that's where I feel like there should have been some smidget of a connection between them. It didn't have to be intimate or anything like that, but some kind of break of like just some commonality that I just didn't see, except for the fact that they had the same skin color, and that was it.
Only reason I took it as is, one, she was asking, and two, it was oppression of Black people, even though he didn't know who the people were.
Gotcha.
But then also, he shouldn't have been like, he gave up on the struggle because the struggle gave up on itself. I didn't really like that answer either, even though I kind of understand, but it was just kind of like, how deep was he into it? He looked like he got hurt, even just, being a part of it. So I don't know. It wasn't really enough. But it ends up where, they go and this amazing, outlandish plan ends up working.
I mean, if we're going to talk about that, then we talk about the fact that she, get in the house, sit on the bed.
Yeah. I like that callback.
You know what I mean? Like, if that wasn't part of a Foxy Brown coffee blaxploitation scene, that's exactly what that was. I can tell you, we've seen that, her come in with a gun with the afro and, oh, you're gonna get it kind of thing. So like, I can't say that wasn't predictable. That part was bound to happen. But when she came out and the husband limped over, that was too much for me. I just, I was glad it was ending at that part, because I was like, that man was dead. He was dead.
The reason why she left in the first place.
Right.
But only thing I thought when I saw him limp out was like, that's why she didn't hook up with Common. As soon as I saw that, I thought, okay, that's why. I was wondering
that was in the writer's mind, but it didn't tell us anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
the writer was like, oh, that's not going to be ethical to like have her fall in love with this guy or have any affection towards him because the husband's still alive. But we didn't know anything about that. There was nothing, you know, maybe if she thought he was dead, if there was some kind of flash to the plantation and somebody was mending him or something like that, then we'd be like, oh, he's still around, you know. Maybe there's hope or something.
I didn't mind it only because, like I said, I don't think they should have a relationship anyway. But the reason why they didn't have a relationship, I thought, was because it was something else going on. But what I'm saying, technically, there shouldn't have been a relationship between them anyway. I don't feel. Right. So it was the right thing, but for different reasons. Right. So so to me thinking he was dead, he didn't make a difference. I just knew why. Because everything else was falling into these hard tropes. So I was wondering how come not that one? You hit every hole in the garden except for this one. Why this one? Why you knew to jump over this one, but everything else? That's what I'm saying. It's hard to tell somebody's intentions when you don't know, like they don't have a history. Like this is their first time writing and first time directing. So I couldn't tell what was on purpose and what was on accident. And this movie to me, even though like I said, it's a great concept, it just like I said, it was just it wasn't really to me in capable hands, and that it was like a lot of missed opportunities, and even if it would have chose a genre, but it was like a slave movie, it was a fish out of water movie, it was a black empowerment. The fact that you even had it called Alice, even if it was like Alice in Wonderland, it was like, you know, I know that was, you know, part of it, I'm sure, but even if it was something that was almost surreal, where unquestioned stuff or weird if you had made the environment or the movie kind of trippy in a way, because the idea is kind of trippy in a way, then you would excuse some of the stuff that you need to make sense, because you know like the world is off and therefore all rules don't apply. It is what it tells you it is. But if you're telling me this is my world 70s, which is highly documented, we saw plenty of examples of it, we got people still alive that could talk about it, and you're trying to play it straightforward, then and you're not equipped, oh no. It's a no. Everything you better make it a world I can't call back on and call you out on it because I don't know it. But if you saying this is my world and this is my situation, my people, and this kind of thing, and you feed me this, no, I will not let that through. No, I don't accept it. And it would
it's your world across the highway too. It's just across the highway.
Exactly.
That's all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the way the relationship was handled, the conversations, the talk, the way stuff was let out, the moves and decisions that she made, all that stuff, all the decisions and stuff that Common made, it was just all crazy. And I know people feel a way about Quentin Tarantino, but to me, this movie in his hands would have been a different thing. This would have been, at least it would seem like it would have been competent, at least, or even M. Night. You know, I think or Jordan Peele, some folks like that. I think that this would be a great concept for them, because it's almost kind of like how Antebellum was. I had different issues with that movie, even though I enjoyed it. I enjoyed this one, but it was just issues. But even with that, you could tell those were newer-ish directors and stuff, even though it was very clean looking and the production value and the costuming and all that kind of stuff. But even that movie kind of fell into certain things that I thought like, this could have been tighter. This could have been, you know. And so it's hard. Like I said, it's not that these movies are necessarily great to me, but I will say that at least they're trying something different. And if it was a straight slave movie, I wouldn't have watched them. So I will say that the twist that they're adding to it or making it something different of how could this be with this is getting me there. Even though I don't necessarily care for the execution of it all the way, I do appreciate the concept and the idea of it. But this might be the future movie that is going to blow my mind that I always wanted these other movies to be. You know, so I kind of think of it like that too.
That's interesting, because I just keep seeing it as a movie that's pieces of different movies kind of put together, as opposed to like a full-on concept. You know, like I said earlier, I was waiting for the time traveler aspect, and like you said, if that's the trippy part to you, like something that catapults you over to the other side instead of just walking over there and it just being like, okay, I'm just going to deal with the reality of what's on the other side, and I'm going to get it within 24 hours. You know, if there was a couple of like, you know, the fact that she was self-taught in that time is also kind of an issue, as opposed to, instead of him saying you should know these things and him like teaching her some stuff, would have been developmentally, you know, better. I thought that she did the best that she could with what she had, you know, as far as her acting. I also thought the little boy, how indifferent he was when he came in the cafe. Like, okay, you know, like, doesn't he have some mental issues? Like, you know, he was on the plantation and now he's in modern time and he's seen people being killed. They were killed over there. This wasn't even like a play. This was real life. Like, people died over there, and, you know, so he's just going in between worlds and it's, you know, not affecting him. So I think it needed another year of development. I think it needed like a mentor to kind of just go, okay, so what is this part doing? Like, why do we need that? Like, kill your darlings here. You know what I mean? Like, you know, you might love it, but it's not moving it. So you just got to take it out, you know?
Yeah, but I think like most movies, they are interpretation or a combination of a whole bunch of other stuff anyway. I don't really think it's too many original stories, because most movies I see, they remind me of something else. But sometimes it's like, did they pull it off better than the other thing? Like, we saw plenty of like The Matrix, and The Matrix was a basic movie, but it was done, you know, in a way where a lot of people, you know, connected to it. But I've seen plenty of movies where the person's walking around and they're the one and don't know they're the one. The Last Dragon's like that. Leroy walking around looking for the master, and he was the master the whole time. Neo looking for the one, he was the one the whole time. Got somebody trying to tell him you're the one. Got the lady friend that's saying, hey, you're the one. Still don't understand you're the one till you come across Show Enough, or you come across Agent Smith and you realize in that moment, stop, I'm the one. You know, they all have those points, you know? One's an underground cult and one was a mega success. I like Last Dragon better, but I'm just saying, they had the extra, you know, they both kung fu movies, you know, so movies are, it's just about timing and nuances and flavoring that kind of dictates, and timing how successful a movie works, or if it works better or, you know, or not for an audience. And like I said, so sometimes I see ideas come along and I'm thinking like, okay, I hope this is going to be the one. I hope it's going to be like the commercial, because sometimes the trailers, even though I don't like them giving away too much, sometimes they can whittle down the essence of what's supposed to be happening. And the only time that when you see the movie, when they have to fill in the spaces in between, is where it went wrong. It wasn't the points. The points are cool. It's just the in between, how you got from point A to point B is hard. That's when they kind of, you know, the truth comes out about what you're dealing with. And so, like I said, this could possibly be a movie like, I'm like, they didn't quite do it right, but then that gave me an idea for this.
Right.
I think it's just like with music, the beat could be used a whole bunch of times, but if somebody did it a little bit different and flipped it, you know, like they're not changing, making it any new notes, and a lot of the scales are redone and the beats and the BPMs are all the same and stuff like that. But if somebody put violins on top of that beat and the other person didn't, that other person might have a hit off that same beat. I just had that song out a year ago, nobody listened to it, but they put violins on top of it or the right voice, then it's just like this brand new thing. And so I think art and stuff is like that. I think movies and music is like that. And it's just, I think there's information that could be learned, and stuff could come from stuff even when it's not, you know, executed the best, I guess. Yeah. So
I think the premise of it was a good idea, you know, as far as just the pitch of it. Like I said, I could see the pitch going. I could see them standing in front of someone, giving them this pitch, and people getting really excited about it, you know, just thinking, you know, because these are two different eras, you know what I mean? And they're both, the theme of both of them is exploitation, you know. I could definitely see that being a big grab for someone to say, well, that's a different spin on it, you know. That might be something I'd like to see, but it's all in the development. It's all in the, you know, how do you get from this point to this point to this point, like the three different points of it. Like, how's it going to end? You know, what's the audience going to gain from it? Not that you should make the film for the audience necessarily, but what are they going to gain from it? How are they going to walk out at the end, you know, after this movie is over with? I think as when you write scripts, if you tend to think that way, sometimes it helps with the development. But if you're basing it just off of like the gets, which is, it's different. No one's ever done this before. So I just want to stick with that pitch and that's it. And you don't develop it as well. That's when your films suffer. And not only your films suffer, but your actors suffer too. Because, like I was saying before, it matched his and it doesn't make any sense because she was a slave and she shouldn't be as quick like that. But if it's written like that, that comes in the writing and the dialogue and, actors act out what they see on the page. And if you don't keep in mind that these people are from two different eras and they shouldn't be communicating on that same level in that same era, that makes the film better too. Because she should have always been a bit slower, a little bit behind in the whole movie, just a tad, not even a tad, just behind. I
think it was a big jump because they had a big mission, was the fact that you're going to take somebody from a slave to Foxy Brown in less than 2 hours. That should be like, that's not possible. That's what that answer should have been. Like, no, doesn't. No.
With just a wardrobe change and a haircut. That's all it took. I mean, afros are empowering, so. Like
I said, I was almost insulted by seeing that same Jet and Ebony magazine in the hospital and on his table, and that's what she kept looking at. And then the, encyclopedias and books and all that kind of stuff. That's like saying, walking from California to New York in one day. Like, you're not being dismissive or somebody who's not believing in somebody's dream, when the reality is that's too much to cover in a short amount of time. Like I said, that's where it take a nuanced director who could find out ways to do shorthand to those things to fill in that spaces to make that happen. Because we've seen things that cover a whole bunch of spans within 2 hours and it's a journey. Epic movies that be only 2 hours long and you saw this person who became nothing to become a king. So we've seen that happen before. To me, it was just like a case of not being able to execute, but the idea I thought was interesting. And I'm not saying this was a great movie. And the reason why I even suggested it to you after I saw it is because those things like, you being into film and stuff and then Black studies and an artist yourself and stuff like that. I thought this would be an interesting conversation about a movie like this. But would it be a movie that I would think be for everybody? No. I think it's a rough one to kind of sit through. But I thought it was interesting that somebody went for it. And just to kind of just see it for what it was. And, because I kind of like everything. Do I intentionally go into bad movies or movies I think I'm not going to like? No. But if I take a chance on a movie and it happens to be bumpy, then it's like, okay, what's something that I at least could get out of it as far as like potential, or did I see what they were trying to do or whatnot? And
that is a valid point because there's two things. I also think budget issues. I think like, how much did they have to work with? You know what I mean? And like, did they offer a larger amount and then it was whittled down to a smaller amount? Or was it sold by, we can make this in X amount of time on this budget and we'll just make it a, whatever amount of days shoot or something like that. So I think those things probably play into it that we don't know, but it's, I think that's common that we can believe that happened, that they made the film, in within 24-hour, 48-hour kind of period. But I think that it does make sense what you said, and as a person who likes films, there's nothing wrong with you going to a film and saying it doesn't appear to be as appealing to me by the way of the trailer, but I'm here to learn. And if it meets my expectations, then I didn't lose any money. And if your expectations was, it's probably not going to be as great as I thought it was because of the trailer, then you've learned something from it. You know what I mean? Especially if you're a film buff or you want to write a script, there's no bad movie if you want to write a script because you're learning from every single movie that you go to. I think they both produced the movie as well. I thought I saw their name on there as producers.
I know I saw a Common's name on there. I wouldn't be surprised if Keke too, but I remember seeing Common name under the producer for sure. And like I said, the writer and director, she is brand new. I went to go see what else that she's done, and this was it. Her name is Krystin Ver Linden. So I'm curious to try to see if they do any interviews and stuff, just so I could see where they were going. Because, like I said, even if they would have did this in a tone of a Black exploitation movie, like it got towards the end, if the first part was done in that way too, at least tie it together. But you got to pick something, and it's more like you conforming what you want to do into a certain style than it is having two separate things and sticking them together and thinking that just because I put them next to each other that they're connected. That line in the road when that car went by was different than the previous plantation part.
Right.
And just because that line was there, you still should feel like you're in the same world. Even if it's supposed to be a different world from the world you've seen before, it still needs to be within that world, to me, for it to gel. Make it consistent, the whole thing. To me, the slave part kind of read more straight than the rest of it.
Right.
You know, it's like, okay, if you're on a plantation talking choppy and unclear and stuff seems unkiltered and this, that makes sense. But you go into the 70s and you're supposed to be, you know, this, like I said, this black dude that's, you know, part of the movement and all this other kind of stuff. And he didn't seem like nobody I would know. Even the way he dealt with stuff. You know, this is my mom's house and there's some stuff in there. And my brother has a bit, like I'm learning all this stuff about all these other people. And he's the one of the main people.
Right.
And like you said, instead of making a sandwich, we need to know what was going on from something. I'd have been fine if he was like, you know what, we're not leaving here until I let you know what's going on. That means they would have had to have a conversation of what she went through because he don't know. So he's thinking she's crazy and she's holding information. And it's not because she can't express herself. It's because for whatever reason, they didn't want her to say it yet because we don't need to know as an audience yet. So that whole conversation she had with slave owner's wife should have been the same as she had with Common.
Right. But look how he found out. We didn't even talk about that. He snuck into the cafe, like, and ear hustled that whole situation. Like, okay. And then he was like, you can't react like that, but still didn't discuss what he heard in that cafe.
And that was my point earlier about how she almost seemed embarrassed by it. Because he was like, huh? Like Alice. And she was looking like what? Like, you heard me say that? Like, what do you mean you embarrassed? You didn't know what it was a day ago. That's what I'm saying. I thought it was weird that she felt embarrassed about the scenario. Like, she couldn't tell him because what he might think of her after she tells him. Even though she done found her looking crazy in the middle of the street. Right. In the first place. And her worse. Like, if anybody would feel comfortable saying anything bad about themselves or something that's, you know, maybe not in the greatest light, is the person who found you in the dark. So I didn't understand where that came from. You know, besides it just being a plot point to let us know on the director's timeline of when they want you to know versus, you know, the natural progression of things. Like I said, I don't think he would have left her in the house. I don't think he would have left her in the hospital. I don't think that he would have let her go back to the plantation without no backup. I don't think a lot of stuff. I don't think that he would have her in that state and not understand, let me see what I can do to help you get back right. Let me let you know what's going on. These people ain't right. This isn't this. You know that you shouldn't be going through that. You know, she found too much on her own. Yeah.
So organically, the whole, like, once he found her and put her in the truck, I don't know, maybe it would have been a car. And he just took her home. You know, she fainted again, you know, when she came in, tossing and turning or whatever. And then what happened to you? What's this about? Oh, I just ran from the plantation, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Or if he had a warrant and he was going to take her to the hospital, he saw the cops out there like, oh, we can't go in here.
That's true because like
anything.
Yeah.
Right. Anything.
Right.
And he saw she was okay. Then, okay, let me call my sister. You know, she's a nurse. She could probably help you out. Hey, man, Franklin, what's going on with this girl? What's going on with her? You can't just leave her here. What's going on with found a highway? What's going on with that? Something.
Right.
Something.
Even well, there was a brother that could have been developed more in that sense. Like she could have been brought inside of the brother's business, and he could have been like, "Man, I just found her on the highway," and they could have both been like, something.
Like I said, we could have even went without even meeting the brother. The brother was just there to beat up on him, and we don't know why he's hard on him. He just tells you he's a screw up, which we could tell already because he seemed confused already. Yes, I think that's the only reason why the brother was there. But I did think it was kind of interesting, not necessarily funny, but interesting when they drove up and she saw those Mexicans on the plantation. So I didn't mind that because it says a lot.
Yeah.
You know, so I thought it was very interesting.
The premise behind that of like, look, you know, this is a modern day situation.
Right. So I didn't mind that scene. But like I said, the brother could have been, unseen. But like I said, they needed for him to ask him, was that, chin check mean?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So he could puff up about that. But, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope me suggesting this movie don't have you thinking that, I have crazy taste in movies, but I just thought it would be worth it. I thought this movie was for the conversation.
That's exactly what I thought when you first recommended. No, I'm like I said, a movie buff and just, would I have seen it probably on my own? I don't follow her as much.
Mm-hmm.
I saw her acting when she was younger. And it just didn't cross my path. Like I said, I enjoyed, and probably still do slave narratives, but accordingly. Mm-hmm. Like I said, like 12 Years a Slave. If it's something that's gonna teach me something, if I'm gonna get some history out of it, then I'm for it. I didn't gain any history out of this because it was 2 eras that I knew about. I like the fact that you mentioned earlier that we didn't have any issue with the slave era. That was developed okay. We had issues with things that were unnecessarily placed there, things that didn't need to be added, but all the actors and everything played their part well in that scene. It was just the other side,
So did you see Antebellum?
I didn't, because I don't like horror movies as much. Like I'm a fan of Hill.
This isn't his movie.
It's not?
No.
But it's still like a horror movie, like that genre though, right?
I'll say this, it's not a horror movie.
It's not? Okay. Now you're gonna...
Don't watch the trailer and check it out.
Okay, now I gotta watch. That's my next assignment.
Yeah,
check it out. Are you sure it's not Isn't it like... Okay, describe the poster to me. What does the poster look like? Because I go by posters.
The poster is, I think it's Janelle Monáe's face, and it's like a butterfly or something like on the poster.
Okay. So it wasn't anything haunting or anything.
Slavery. Okay. That was haunting.
Okay, tell me a little bit about this. It wasn't like a time traveling situation, was it?
I'm not going to say. I'm going to say it wasn't a horror movie. I don't know. When you have slavery movies, what's the worst monster than the slave master?
Yeah, you got me.
You know what I mean, though?
Yeah, it's true. There's nothing else more haunting. Even the ghosts are freaking.
Exactly.
Right?
And the first time I ever saw a monster bigger than the slave masters was on Lovecraft.
Yeah, I couldn't watch that.
Are you serious?
I could not watch that. I saw the beginning of it where it was like, yeah, when they were traveling and stuff, but then when they got to that house, I was like, I can't do it.
You have to.
I cannot. I cannot.
Ooh. I'm not gonna get into it, but ooh.
Oh, you guys will just tell me all about it because I can't.
Wait, so you saw the first episode? You saw the first episode?
I watched up until they got to the house, and
okay. Then
there was something going on where they were trying to like attack the folks there or something.
Yeah, they got to the big old mansion thing, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you might as well just tell me everything about that.
Because that had some horror in it. That did.
Yeah.
Because each episode was like a different kind of a thing. So that's more horror. But the way we were represented in it made it beautiful. Made
really?
It very, very, very powerful. Because some of it was creepy to me too. And I was kind of like, ooh. But in that world, even though they were like the evil that white people were doing, it was the slave masters, and you had everything was kind of like segregated or whatnot. And even though black folks was preyed upon, the whole thing about that was kind of like, even though you had these white folks that had magic that was after the black folks and stuff, that magic came from the black folks. And they were the real heirs to that magic. And they wanted to keep them away from getting what was their birthrights.
Okay.
And them getting a hold of it and doing what they had to do with it. And it was just kind of like folks trying to do their Hail Mary of keeping the black folks in their place and out of what they really, is their birthright. It's a very interesting show, got canceled. It was just too much. Yeah. And then the second season and what she had in mind, what she wanted to do, they surely wasn't trying to hear that either.
Well, what's the main actress in that? I forgot her name.
Are you talking the
actress? Yeah.
Yeah.
She was in Underground, which was one of my favorite shows.
I did not watch that show.
Oh my God.
I heard good things about it.
It was great. And it got canceled. Yeah. It had high ratings and it got canceled.
Yeah, we can't be winning. It's funny.
Yeah.
It's a fine line. They'll give you all the parts until it's time for you to come up, or you say that somebody's the enemy directly. As long as it's implied, it's fine. But if you be like, "Hey," and they stand up to that, and then it's a problem. It has to be It has to be done. It has to be done.
Right.
But if you don't watch Lovecraft, like I said, I did a podcast with my boys and we talked about it. We went deep on that. But I hope that when you're ready, I hope you revisit it. But yeah, so thank you for checking out the show. Sorry for checking out the movie, I mean.
No. Don't be sorry about that at all, because like I said, I am constantly open to learning. You know what I mean? And I enjoy film, and I enjoy communicating with you on, this level of your podcasts. So I was honored, and now I have to check out the other one, not Lovecraft.
Yeah, no, not that, but Antebellum. It was interesting what they tried to do. Like I said, the execution of it, it wasn't, if it wasn't for a discussion, I wouldn't recommend it. If you was like, hey, would you recommend this movie, Alice? I was like, not unless you, like I said, just wanted something to check out and kind of see where they were going. But yeah, so I guess I was right in thinking that it would be a good conversation, which it was. Appreciate your input and everything. It was cool. And in all fairness, if you come across a movie that you want me to check out, even if I haven't seen a trailer, let me know. I'll check it out and then we'll discuss it as well.
Well, that's going to happen. Be prepared.
Hey, I'm down for a challenge, so.
All right. It might be a rom-com. Just kidding.
Oh, I like everything, so. Yeah, so I'm open. I like everything, but yeah. All right. So, was there any last words that you had?
I enjoyed the acting in the beginning of it, and it's everything that we said before. That I wish it was a little bit more developed, but I think that everyone has their first film, and I think as a filmmaker, it's pretty exciting to get something in the can and, get the green light to produce it. And I would say, applause to her for getting it that far, you know what I mean? And having that dream come true since it's her very first film, good luck to her in that sense of the next ones that come along. Cause I don't want to say it can't get any worse, but it's going to get better. Yeah. It's going to get better. That wasn't the worst. It just needed to be developed more. It needed more time for development, and it's only going to get better from here. Everybody starts somewhere. So that was her start. Yeah.
That's right on. That's very, very fair. Like I said, I dug it just for, like I said, the concept of it. Like I said, I don't think it was executed to the best that it could have been. Mm-hmm. I think movies lately, just because of the pandemic and different things, they haven't been up to par. So I find myself recently just kind of more looking for, and maybe because I'm up to something too, I don't know, but I'm more right now into concepts and ideas more so than I am into execution. Sometimes I just really like the ideas just so I can start thinking a different kind of way. And so the actual product I'm not as hung up on as I am just like, that was interesting. Good, bad, or indifferent. And like I said, for me, I can't even watch a slave movie if it was just a straightforward slave movie. So I'm always curious, like, what can be done to this that's going to make it something that I would get me out of my thing to actually see them. So this is my conversation with Sebrenia with our open discussion about the movie Alice. Until next time, peace.
Peace, everyone.